Hi, welcome to Third Space Live. I'm Jody Peel, and this is a show that offers conversations, ideas, and stories around building mental wellness. In a few moments, I'll introduce you to today's guest, Gary Brucker. But before I do, I will remind you that you can learn all about our charity and the programs and services that we offer our community at thirdspacecanada.org. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram, and you can view the video library of all of our shows on our YouTube channel. Today's July 28th, 2020, and this is episode 26. Gary is going to be talking to us today about social emotional learning. What it is, and why it's critically important to our young people, all humans actually, but it's important for all of our health and happiness. Gary's going to introduce us some methods for parents and teachers to develop social emotional skills in kids, like personal responsibility, self-control, good decision-making, and strong character, while at the same time teaching parents and teachers how to have long-term respectful and healthy relationships with children while doing so. This is where he's going to introduce us to some methodology called Love and Logic. So without further ado, I am going to be telling you a little bit more about Gary, and then I'm going to introduce a little bit more about the show. Gary is the program director of a not-for-profit in Kelowna, British Columbia called Courage for Youth. For over 25 years, Gary, who is a dynamic speaker and educator, has been involved in providing innovative and life-changing educational programs to children, youth, and adults. He is a trained Love and Logic facilitator. He has a passion for helping people to get more tools for their life toolbox, which I love. Gary oversees implementation of the Courage for Youth programs, as well as their conferences, development and fundraising initiatives, and he's worked there for 8 years. Gary's also on staff at the First Lutheran Church in Willowstone Academy here in Kelowna. He's been there for 26 years, and he's also more recently become a co-owner and co-founder of the Barn Owl Brewing Company here in Kelowna, which is a great place. If you haven't been there, I recommend you go check it out. Gary lives in Kelowna with his wife and 3 kids, 3 daughters, and I'm excited to invite him to the show. I'm just going to say 2 more words before I do. I'm going to be commenting a little bit about the current state of the world and our community in this pandemic. I know that parents everywhere right now are talking about what this upcoming school year might look like in the midst of the pandemic, and families with school-age children are facing likely another year with reduced or no in-school learning. Since March of this year, most families in BC and many other places in the world parents are finding themselves as pseudo-teachers. And as if these times aren't stressful enough, parents are now caring for kids that are also struggling more than ever with stress and anxiety caused by the change and uncertainty and social isolation from this pandemic. So parents are seeking, maybe now more than ever, parenting skills to help manage their kids' emotions and emotional health. And this is an opportunity for parents, today's talk and what Gary's going to talk to us about, because social emotional learning is key to helping kids do this. So I'm going to invite Gary right now to join us. Hi, Gary.
Good day. Hello. How are you?
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
That was a long intro, but I thought I should set the stage a little bit because it's so timely right now that you're joining us in this environment. I mean, it's something parents really need right now, is they need help.
Well, and we're in so many ways in uncharted territories. I mean, I was thinking as you were giving the introduction, I'm very grateful on a personal level that I don't have young children right now, where you're having to work, many people from home, especially in the spring. They're working from home. They're having to act as teacher. They're trying to manage the house, their work situation, and parent at the same time. The other thing that I found really, it's both ironic and I think troubling in terms of uncharted territory is, the organization I work for, Courage for You, really encourages a balance of screen time and getting kids off of their devices and the interaction face to face. And yet they've been forced online in so many other ways, not only for their learning, but for their socialization. And
Absolutely.
the parents are trying to manage that as well as everything else right now. And so that's why I say uncharted territories, because I don't think we're even yet beginning to see the effects of what that's going to have. We already know that it affects our brain development, the amount of screen time we have. We know that it affects how we interact with each other on a longer term basis, how we empathize with others. So the very things we were trying to pull kids out of, we're now pushing them into more. And I think there's just a whole Pandora's box of unknowns coming our way very soon.
I have lived experience with that, living with teenagers at home and feeling that pull, like, wow, they're connected all the time, but at the same time, that's their lifeline. So it's complicated. Yeah.
I've been working on a book that I'm hoping at some point I get time to actually finish, and it's called Never Alone. It's about the generation that we're raising right now, where they're never alone. You know, you and I growing up, we could put down our devices because we didn't really have a device that kept us connected 24/7. If we wanted to talk to our friend, we did maybe get on the phone, and we, you know, maybe got in trouble for talking for an hour on the phone, or you know, we'd go down the street and hang out with our friends. But when we came home, we were alone. We were hanging out with our family, or we had alone time where we could read or let our imagination run wild. But because of devices, our smartphones and other things, our computers, we're raising a generation that is never alone, but very lonely in many other ways because of the depth of the relationships they have. So there's so much to talk about when we talk about social emotional well-being and development. And I think I was talking with a couple of other educators last week about the unknowns going into fall for parents, for educators, for kids themselves, and how that itself causes anxiety for all of us.
Yeah, wow. There is a lot to talk about. Right before we started the show, we actually suggested maybe this is a couple talks. So we'll see how far we get today. But I thought maybe what I'd do is define for people who aren't familiar with social emotional learning, what that is. And then you can talk to us all about why it's important that kids learn these things. So I've got social emotional learning is the process through which children or adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitude, and skills necessary to understand and manage their emotions, to set and achieve positive goals, to feel and show empathy for others, to establish and maintain positive relationships, and to make responsible decisions. Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right. And there's a lot there to unpack.
So why is this important? What are the benefits?
Well, I think what we do know about humans in general is we are social beings. We interact, and we do best in life when we have the security of being loved and cared for, and in relationships that are meaningful and deep. We know that learning on all levels happens better when we're healthy emotionally, when we feel loved and supported, which is, you know, when jumping ahead a bit, when we talk about love and logic parenting, it's really about allowing kids to own their decisions and choices along the way, because there are consequences for all of us. If I was to ask you, your most important and biggest lessons in life, Jody, were they learned because you just succeeded all the time, or were the lessons you've learned about some big things because you actually messed up along the way?
And you know what? We haven't talked about this, but yes, I am a young soul that has messed up many, many, many times.
And that's the case for all of humanity. We actually know that we learn better when we actually make some mistakes along the way, but are loved through those mistakes. We're not shielded from the consequences of them, but we're actually loved and cared for. Somebody walks with us through the messes that we make and helps us get to the other side. That's what a healthy social emotional learning is. A big component of that is being supported, because as humans, we're going to make mistakes along the way. We're not always going to be perfect. And what can we learn from that so that we can do better next time? And we know that that's the big piece of that is the parenting piece, and how parents don't rescue their kids from experiencing that, but in fact, they're right there more as the consultant along the way to say, oh, yeah, that's what happens when you do that. There's a consequence, but to empathize with the child. And empathy is such a huge piece of the social emotional learning for kids and adults. And so many times with our Courage for Youth programs, with our facilitators, with the teachers, even with the parents, I say, oh man, I wish in grade 5 or 6 or 7, I would have had the opportunity to learn some of those things that could have saved me a lifetime of heartache in terms of some of the relationship issues that they've dealt with or are still dealing with. And so that big piece for us is healthy humans have social, emotional learnings that are healthy. And the empathy piece is huge.
Yeah, I can relate to that. You know this about me, that our family was introduced to social emotional learning because of the needs of one of my children. And when I started learning about it, I was so drawn to it because I was starving for it, because I never learned these things. And I had that same feeling that, man, I wish I would have learned this stuff when I was younger. I would have avoided a lot of pain and bad decisions. It also occurred to me that every human would benefit from learning these things. And I'm interested how you feel about the traditional focus on our education system, which is more focused on intellectual skill building and physical skill building and not social emotional. And I know this is changing. I know most provinces have curriculum now in place. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I think that is the huge piece right now in education almost everywhere. The realization that it can't just be about facts and skills. It's got to be, kids learn better the facts and skills if they're actually supported socially and emotionally along the way. And so the emphasis in this new BC curriculum coming out a few years ago was a real shift to not just one or two classes that help kids with their social emotional development, but it's actually infused into every subject area, core learning areas, core competencies in the curriculum. Courage for Youth has been around since 2003 and actually was born out of a real need in this school district, in School District 23 here in Kelowna, for relational aggression issues in grade 5 and 6 girls. And the group of concerned parents and educators came together and said, this is an issue. How do we address this? And schools were looking for resources. And that's really how Courage for Youth got founded, was based on that one really important need. How do we support girls in adolescence in dealing with conflict? And then they quickly found out that you can't just tell someone not to do something, don't be mean, or don't get involved in that behavior. That worked for a while as an exterior force. But really, we learn best and live best when it's from the inside out. And so Courage for Youth was really a values-based curriculum approach to some very important life skills, helping students look on the inside and say, what's really important to me? And how are the decisions I'm going to make, how will they reflect what's important to me? And so that's one of the key components of what we do at Courage for Youth, is helping grade 5, 6, 7 kids determine what their core values are, and then helping them make decisions on how they're going to live those out in their life, knowing they're going to mess up, and then supporting them through their mess ups along the way. It's just really key for all humanity, really, is to help us realize that primary need we have to be loved and to be cared for starts with me knowing myself, me knowing that I'm got some weaknesses, and knowing that one of the things I need is to be loved and cared for. And we don't talk that way very often with kids. And so this recent curriculum in almost every area of this country is shifting to the importance of social emotional learning, knowing that unless we carry on that component, we might be putting some facts in kids' heads, but they're going to learn better when they're cared for, first of all, that attachment to a teacher or to adults along the way, their parents along the way, but also it's going to be more meaningful for them because it actually is real life. It's more than just a bunch of facts or a skill set that they might use someday. This is about, the schools we work with they realize that the most important thing they might actually teach kids are these social interactions and these relational competencies that allows them to navigate the world in which we live, and including an online world right now, that, the very things we talk about in terms of it becomes somewhat easier to duck behind a keyboard or your phone and say things you wouldn't necessarily say if you were looking at somebody in the face. That's one of the components of all of our programs, is that empathy piece, and helping them to identify, well, what would it feel like to be bullied online? to have somebody say that to you, either online or in person. And when you can help kids understand what it would feel like, then it actually, if you could insert, we always say this, if you could insert an empathy chip into every human being, bullying, aggressive behavior would almost disappear. It's a key component to removing aggressive behavior and bullying, whether that's online bullying, whether that's physical bullying, whether that's relational bullying. When we start to help kids identify what it would feel like to be on the receiving end.
Yeah, I've seen you at work in the classroom, and maybe we'll talk about the SCREAM program as an example in a moment. But the one point I wanted to make before I moved on was that the social emotional learning in the middle school years is critically important, we know, developmentally, based on the science that you base all of your programming on. But we also see it in our charity because we work with post-secondary students, and we see students who are crazy intellectually skilled, best and brightest at some of the institutions here in our own town, post-secondary institutions, yet these same kids either don't have a clue who they are, where they're going, why they're going, like they're about to graduate out of a technical, like a pretty high level degree, and they still don't know who they are or what they want because they've never learned these things, or they're having trouble with relationships, or they don't have emotional resiliency because they don't have those tools. So and as a parent with a child who struggles with some of these things too, I realize the value of, from a lifelong point of view, of having all these skills and these tools for the rest of your life, because like you said, it's preparing kids for all the stuff that adult life's going to give them. And simply teaching them facts and how to do math and where to find things on a map certainly isn't all they need to learn before they're set out into the world.
No, and some of the discussions I've had with teachers are that, and the ones that really get it, I believe, they understand that kids are going to actually learn facts better and some of those skill sets better when their social emotional needs are met, and when they're learning those skills along the way, how to interact, how to work in a group project with someone you don't even like. How do you do that? Because that's life. I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
I often say to grade 5 boys, I mean, who are their default position for most of them, if they get into a conflict, they'll just push or shove or say something mean. They recognize that. Whereas a bit stereotypical, but more, they will tell you, both boys and girls in grade 5, that the girls' default position for most of them, if they get in a conflict, will be to either bury it or talk about somebody else behind their back, rather than deal with it in a physically aggressive way, or even other types of behavior that we would more see in boys. Either way, it's unhealthy. So how do we help kids deal with conflict in a healthy way? Because as I would tell a grade 5 boy or a grade 5 girl, if you did that in your workplace, you walk up to somebody and you're not getting along when you're a 40-year-old man, and all of a sudden you walk into your boss's office and say, you're an idiot, or give them a shove, you're probably not going to have a job very long. And yet that we know that is very often what happens. We don't give kids these skills, and so then they become adults without these skills, and they're not natural for most people. Empathy, unfortunately, is not just naturally inbred in most people. They see it modeled, they identify it, they start to identify their own feelings, and that's when they start to experience it and live it out. The same with some interpersonal relationship skills need to be practiced along the way. Generally, people are not necessarily good at expressing their feelings or dealing with conflict in a way that said, what you said really hurt me. I will always remember one of the most poignant learnings for me as a SCREAM facilitator with one of the programs we have at Courage for Youth. I was at a school in rural Alberta that had some ongoing, pretty big relational aggression issues in grade 7, boys and girls. And during the course of the week, when we were talking, the day we were talking about all the technology pieces and how we can use social media for good. And one of the boys came up after class. This is a farm kid, pretty tough kid, and said to his teacher, it's happening to me right now. There's somebody in this class that's created an online account, is bullying me online, is saying things that aren't true about me. Here's a grade 7 boy, 13, 14 years old, crying, like big farm kid, tough kid, but crying because he's feeling this emotional weight of what others are making him feel like. And so I got to sit in on the debrief of this, where she brought the two boys together in the classroom afterwards. And she said, I'll just choose a name, but she said, Scott, would you tell Paul what he's done and how it makes you feel? It was really hard, but Scott was able to say, when you created that online account, these things that you said about me, like, it's not true. And it's hurting not only me, but it's hurting my other relationships. And he's, bless him, 13, 14-year-old boy crying his eyes out in the classroom. And she says to Paul, look at him when he's talking to you. And Paul would not make eye contact with him. And she said, Paul, you're not leaving here. You'll miss your bus, you'll miss your evening activities unless you look at him when he's talking to you and telling you how what you've done actually makes him feel. After many minutes, Paul finally looks at Scott, and Scott says it again, when you did this. He's crying. And guess what the reaction all of a sudden of the bully became?
He cried?
He cried. So you got two pretty burly farm kids, grade 7 boys, both crying in front of their teachers crying. Again, this isn't airy, fairy fluff stuff. This is about real life feelings. And when we don't allow kids to feel, and when we don't help them process those feelings, we're not doing anybody a service.
And we're perpetuating some of the unhealthy socialization.
Right, and that was such a healthy moment for the bully to feel. That's empathy, when you can feel what your words have done to somebody else. And so that was, for me, we strive for that empathy piece. How do we help others talk to each other in a way that would help them understand what somebody else is experiencing or feeling? And it's a beautiful thing when it happens, when you can catch a glimpse of what's going on. And we play something called the card game on day 4 of Scream, where they each get a card on their back, from an ace to a king. They don't know what card they have. And then we play a little game where they talk to their classmates for 3 to 5 minutes. And at the end of that, based on how they were treated, they get to determine, they guess at what card was on their back. And we tell them, okay, you really want to hang out with the 10, Jack, Queen, King. That's who you want to hang out with. You want to find out some things about them. The 5, 6, 7, 8, you might, or 5 to 9s, you might want to hang out with them a bit, but you're not giving them a lot of your attention. And the aces to the 4s, you want nothing to do with. They're not the people, they're not the cool kids. You do not want to be. And the game only lasts 3 to 5 minutes, but I can tell you at the end of that, it becomes very clear that when we treat people a certain way, and those kids then get to say, well, man, I felt horrible to be treated like a 1 to a 4, even though it's just a little game in the classroom. And then with their challenge to say, are there kids in your classroom, in your school, that feel like a 1 to a 4 every day based on how they're treated and the level of respect they're given? And occasionally we'll have the brave kids that will stand up and say, I'm one of those kids. And when the rest of the class can see that and experience that in any tangible way, it changes the climate in the classroom.
So
because they're the only ones that can
I've seen
change
you
it.
at work. I've seen your team at work. I went and sat in a few months ago, and I cried at least 3 times, mostly relating to one of the students who said some profound things in the middle of some of your exercises. Like, you would prompt the class to say, so explain to us what it's like when your classmates talk to you when they're angry or whatever, or and he basically just said, look, nobody ever talks to me. Like, this is the first time anybody's ever talked to me. And I was like heartbroken. And then that exercise at the end, when you ask the students to go around the room and write positive words of descriptions of adjectives that they would use to describe their fellow classmates on each other's arms. He walked by me on the way out the door and said, and with tears in his eyes, I'm never washing my arms again. Because it was the most positive experience he's ever had at school.
Well, and all they're challenged to in that activity is they don't have to write 5 words. They have to write 1 word that builds up. And they're, this is on day 4 of the program, day 5 of the program in some cases, where they've been prompted to know what healthy relationships look like. They've helped identify traits that are healthy. They've helped make lists of words that are positive in terms of describing relationships and people. And then all they have to do is pick 1. I mean, in your life and mine, we might not choose to hang out with certain people, but could we find one good thing to say about them that would actually affirm who they are? Probably we could. And that's what we're helping kids do at a very young age. They don't have to be best friends with everybody, but does everybody, should everybody expect a certain level of compassion and understanding and respect from their classmates? Just like in the world around us, in my office, in all of my jobs are working with the public. I might not choose to be best friends with some of those people, but can I give them a certain level of dignity and respect, just based on the fact that they're human going through their own things? Probably yes.
Yeah, and all these things, like you've said, transfer into real life in so many ways. Friendships, work relationships, marriages, parenting, yeah, you name it. So maybe it would be helpful for the viewers to just, for you to say in a few words what the youth programs are that Courage for Youth offers and what they look like.
Our flagship program, our biggest program, is a grade 6 or grade 7 program, depending on where it's situated, called Scream. It's like screaming your life in a big way. We ask kids, have you ever been on a roller coaster? And if, have you screamed? Because scream can be a part of being fearful, of being sad, of being excited. And we want kids to be able to scream their life in a very positive way. But it's an acronym. And so during the week-long program, which is half the day, usually mornings, it's about 12 and a half to 15 hours of curriculum time. And it fits in so well with the present curriculum in Alberta and British Columbia specifically right now.
So the teacher invites you in, or the principal invites you in?
Yes, we come and work with the classes based on the invitation from the particular school or teachers at that school. And we'll do, say, all of the grade 6s or all of the grade 7s in that school. They'll all get the Scream program. And then we spend half of those days on the S of Scream is strengths. We help kids do an online assessment. Strength Explorers, which is a kid's version of Strength Finders, which many adults will be familiar with from Gallup, which helps adults find out the things they're really good at.
I'm recording that show in 2 days with Ed and Ron. So thank you.
Yeah, they're the experts. So the kid version of this is really user friendly for kids to start to see a healthy sense of what am I good at, and how can I even use my strengths to work on the areas I'm not good at, and how can I use my strengths with my classmates' strengths to actually be better together, to achieve success individually and together. That's really day one of Scream, is all about strengths, and we use that thread throughout the whole week, is using their strengths. Day 2 of Scream is the C, and we talk about character. We watch a really powerful movie called 20-minute short film called Butterfly Circus, and they start to see and identify that what's important to somebody shows forth in their character. So character, we always say, what's behind our character is our values. The values steer the ship. What's important to me will come out in how I treat other people, how I spend my time, how I make decisions, how I spend my money, how I'm involved in relationships. And when there's a disconnect between what we say is important and how we act, that's generally when we get into trouble in life. And so if we can help kids at an early age develop a sense of what's important to me, what are my important values and beliefs, and how can I live that out, even if I'm going to mess up occasionally, what does that look like? And so character and values on day 2, which also then spills over to day 3. It's the R and the E of Scream. It's reviewing and educationally managing our media and technology. So everything that has to do with media and technology, from commercials and videos and video games that come at us, sometimes without us having any control over the content. We call that imposed media. Or they even go to a movie. You might know the name of the movie and what it's about, but you have no control over what the images are that's coming at you, or the images that are coming at you, and the audio, all those things. And you have a choice. Is that a reflection of who I am and my core, my values? But we always say, if you're watching and participating in stuff online or with your media and technology that your grandma, you'd be embarrassed if your grandma was sitting there with you. It probably means it's not in line with what's important to you or what should be important to you. We talk about
you talk about critical thinking and fact checking and things like that as well?
Yes, all part of that. So we got imposed media on that day. We've got informational media, because we're accessing so much information on media, and how to try to discern what's fake news or real information from not accurate information, and trusted sites and all those things. when it's safe, practical things. When is it safe to put your parents' credit card information and teach your parents that this is not okay to do, or when this happens, you can do this. And then the social media portion is so huge for these kids, from the relational aggression point of view, but also just what healthy interaction online would look like. I don't need to give all my personal information out on social media. Is it okay to tell your parents where you are and what, connect with people? Absolutely. It's so great to be able to have, even right now, what we're using a technology piece. You asked, 4 months ago, if you asked people what Zoom was, many people would not have known. Now almost everybody knows what Zoom is. When you have kids list all their social medias, whether it's TikTok and Zoom and Instagram and Snapchat, and again, you go back 5-10 years, those terms did not exist because the technology did not exist, or the app did not exist. And what we do is, on that day, we actually have the kids list how many devices they would have needed 15 years ago to do what this does today. How many different devices would they have to carry around with them? And it's like 50 or more devices. They make a list, and they're shocked that they're growing up in a world they see that this has really changed a lot. Anyway, we tie it into their values as well. And there's 3 values that we really try to play on. We say, if these values were throughout the world, it would make a difference. If it was in every person, and we call them the WIC values, or like a wick of a candle: wisdom, integrity, and courage. Not we're ever going to live them out perfectly, but if they were in every person, the world would be a different place. Wisdom, accepting, trying to get the best information and making our decisions based on that information and trusted input. Integrity, living honestly, even though it's hard to do. Who I am when I'm with my parents, is that who I am when I'm with my friends? Being truthful, even when I blow it, am I honest about that? And courage, standing up for someone, doing the right thing takes courage, takes bravery, and trying to get kids to see how important those values are, as well as those other values that are really core to who we are in terms of humanity. On the Thursday, or day 4 of Screen Week, it's a double A. It's just authentic alliances. It's all about real life relationship skills. Even how to get along with people we don't really like. That's the piece we talked about. How can you say one word of affirmation? Or how do we fight healthily? I mean, how do we disagree with somebody and use assertive communication to actually express ourselves in a way that's healthy rather than destructive? How do we help kids put a value into every relationship, with their parents, with their teachers, with their coaches, with their brothers and sisters, with their friends, and with those people that are just acquaintances or they don't like, and giving some basic relationship skills. It's a powerful day. And then finally, on the Friday, last day of our week, the M is my life is my influence, helping kids see that to be a hero, we look at hero stories, but to be a hero is just to give of your time and of yourself to make a difference for somebody else. And it's the little things along the way. Some of them are already heroes to their brothers or sisters, or to their grandparents, or some of them have grandparents and parents that have been heroic to them. And so helping them make that connection that they can be real life heroes by just giving of themselves. So it really ties the week together. They actually create a document as a class that is our commitment to this community based on their learnings of the week. How will they live this out for the year? Which is really one of the reasons I continue to be a facilitator and a proponent of this program, is because it's not a one-off week. It's a great fun week with kids, but their teachers are now empowered to use this as a stepping stone to keep this going for the rest of the school year. And which really has, when we go back in 4, 5, 6 months after we've done the program, to hear their stories back and how it's changed them, how it's changed their school environment, their classroom relationships. That's the powerful part of this. It's not just some facts that we give them. It's about an experience that they're learning, this social emotional piece.
And you explained to me that you also have a parent component that you're building out on as well, that involves the parent, because the kid needs to get that bolstered or supported at home as well, not just in the classroom.
Right. So we send resources home for the parents. We actually we offer a parent evening so they see what the kids are learning and to see how they can best support it. Here's what we're knowing, and here's what we know as parents. We're not really looking for one more 2-hour seminar to go to. So we were finding that fewer and fewer parents were actually coming, unless there was a major bullying situation going on in the classroom. Then the parents are there. They want this dealt with. but in terms of just learning as much as they want to. So we're trying to move some of those components to online. So every day, that's our goal this year in the program, is to be able to develop and then send home a short, like 2-minute video at the end of each of those component days. So to say, this is what we did today, have the kids actually tell them, this is what we did today in our program. Here's what we learned. Here's how you can support that learning. Here's what we could talk about if we go for an ice cream or have dinner together tonight. Here's what it's gonna, here's how you can do it. So that's really the piece, because we know that that is, again, when the teacher buys into it and the parent buys into it, that's when powerful things happen. They're very influential in their kids' lives.
It's funny that you mentioned the fact that parents tend, in your experience with the program, tend to be more reactive to problems as opposed to realizing that this is a proactive opportunity. And it speaks to our socialization as from our generation, right?
Absolutely.
The whole idea of this is that you're teaching kids skills to have a happier, healthier, more successful life now and moving forward in life. And a lot of us parents don't get it because we never learned it. So it's important to make everybody realize that.
Right, and I think that's it. It's a dynamic and changing thing. The world in which we live today, and in terms of our devices and other things, even for us adults, is changing at a rapid pace. And so, how amidst that do we add one more thing? But it's such a core and key thing to us raising our kids in a healthy way. My kids call me out on it all the time. If we're having a discussion and I'm on this thing, put it down, Dad. I'm still learning that. For one of my work pieces, I am the social media guy. So to be on this, doing that, and still find time to put it down and interact face to face is a challenge. It's a challenge for us parents. So how do we try to manage that, but also teach our kids a healthy way to do that? We try to give them little hints, both parents and kids, especially around meal times. We find families are one of the good things I think that came out of COVID, which we've heard repeatedly from kids and parents, is that they were forced to spend more time together. And almost universally, it was a good thing. Whether it was walks around the block, whether it was more family game time, whether it was, I had university age kids in my house, and they were home more than I had seen them in years, and they were hanging out with us, and they were interacting and talking with us, and we didn't have to be rushing off somewhere because there was nowhere to go. In fact, we were encouraged to stay home. So it was a walk around the block, it was games night, it was watching a movie and having a discussion together, it was just being. It was a slower pace, and those are some things I would love to continue whenever COVID stuff is over, is those kind of skills for all of us to learn. Yeah, exactly.
So just being mindful of time, would it be suffice to say that there's more to learn about Courage for Youth on the website?
Absolutely. At courageforyouth.com, you can find a lot of our programs and the philosophy behind it. Learn something about our facilitators and how schools, we work with schools and organizations to get our programs there. And we're really looking for opportunities as we grow for reaching out in different capacity to different areas. We're going to really work on our parent piece this year in terms of how do we help equip parents and educators to provide the very things that we're talking about. We know if we're just there for a week, that's okay. We can give some tools, but when parents and teachers are reinforcing that and working on that in their own lives, but also with their kids, how much more powerful that can be. Some of the most powerful things that we've done as an organization have been some of our bigger parenting workshops. Did one years ago called Fighting for Your Daughter, where we helped 100 dads in the room that night learn the culture of their daughters, what they're facing, the pressures they faced. And we had these 3 teenage girls that were telling their dad, this is the world in which we live in, and this is what we need from you. That workshop in particular, that 1-2 hours, the first time we did it was over 12 years ago. I still get dads that tell me that was one of the most critically important things that they learned, was to hear from those girls what they needed from their dads. There's still some of those guys that yearly write their daughters a letter telling them how beautiful they are inside and out, how capable they are, and how loved they are. It's not really something we're taught very well as a society, that the dads should interact with their kids in that way, but how powerful it can be. Building opportunities to bond. We know the attachment piece. We're learning more and more about, when kids are pushing us aside and they just want to hang out with their friends. We've said, well, that's just normal. And it is to some degree, but it's actually the time when we need to hold on to them even more. Not all the time. We need to equip them, but they need to know that everything else in their life is changing. Their hormones are changing. Their world is changing. What isn't going to change is our care and concern and us cheering for them and loving them even when they're making mistakes and struggling. So that attachment piece from both teachers and parents, that's when they're going to learn best, for sure. We know that. Brain development shows us that.
Yeah. Great. So perfect segue to touch on the love and logic piece that you wanted to touch on today, which makes me really excited. Tell us what love and logic methodology is and how to apply it.
Love and Logic is really quite simple at its core. Love and Logic is from the Love and Logic Institute in Colorado. And there's many school districts in the States right now that if you sign your kids up for preschool, they just say, do you want the Tuesday night edition of Love and Logic Parenting, or do you want the Thursday night? It's not even an option, because it's the philosophy of the school and of how they're going to equip parents.
Great.
It's basically, how do you get kids to make as many choices on their own based on good input from adults? And even when they mess up, you want kids to mess up when the price tag is small, but they're loved through it. So there's a component of teaching parents an empathy piece, even in terms of, because again, going to brain development, if we only get angry at our kids when they mess up, two things happen. One, they're more apt to just fight us on it, because that goes to a part of the brain that's just like, oh, they're just losing their mind again. And it's easier to write them off as a raging parent that's just out of control, rather than to have someone say, I'm so sorry you made that choice. That's what happens. Even as an adult, when we make that choice, there's a consequence to that. And to genuinely help them realize that I it's not fake. I'm sorry you made that choice, because it has a consequence, but it's not going to love you any less because of it. It goes to a different place. You become the ally of your kids and you help them own their choices. So in a very small nutshell.
You're not going to fix it. You're just holding it with them.
Yes. And you're there again as, okay, well, would you like to talk about what that looks like, how we can get out of this? You're not rescuing. In Love and Logic Parenting, we talk about three types of parent. We talk about the helicopter parent, who's always there, either trying to prevent a problem from happening or right away rescuing their child when they get into trouble. We've all seen that. We've all been that at some point. We've got the drill sergeant parent that just is like, I'm going to tell you how you're going to do it. You're not going to ever do that. And if you do that, this is going to be the end result. And, oh, you did that. I can't believe that. Here's the consequences of that. Versus the consultant parent that together helps kids develop what's a healthy set of rules, healthy set of consequences that actually match. One of the most helpful things, I think, for parents in Love and Logic in our feedback forms is that we help them develop logical consequences for behaviors. So, we've all been the parent at one time that loses their mind in anger because for the 10th time a child has done this behavior, and without thinking, we just say, you're grounded, or you've lost your privilege. There's no tie of, okay, what's a logical consequence? Because what we really want is to teach kids what the real world, how it works. We want them to know, if this was to happen in the real world, this is the consequence. I just had this discussion with one of my upper teenage daughters about, hey, well, what happens in the real world if you show up late that many times, or if you talk to your boss like that repeatedly? Because I'll tell you what happens. You're probably not going to have a job very long.
Yeah.
So we want to allow them to make the mistakes when the price tag's a lot cheaper.
Yes. Yeah.
So, the example is given if a child destroys a toy repeatedly because they're rough with it or whatever. Let's say a 7-year-old boy destroys the same toy time after time again, but we just buy him a new one. We're just reinforcing that. Or we'll get angry at him and we still end up giving him a new one. Okay, well, what's a logical consequence in the real world if you destroy something that somebody else paid for?
It's gone, or you have to buy a new one.
Exactly. So then how do you help empower the kid to say, well, how are we going to solve that problem? I'm not going to solve it. I'll help you solve it, but what's that going to look like? And so, helping the kid figure out that, oh, okay, that's 2 weeks allowance, or I'm going to have to work at some tasks. I'm going to have to somehow get money to pay that back. so I can get that back or replace that because I wrecked it. It's a lot cheaper when it's a $30 toy or game versus a $20,000 car that they were all of a sudden didn't know that they had to take, the consequence was I wrecked it, I got to replace it kind of thing. Again, we've all known parents probably that have come to the rescue on bigger things too. That's generally not the way the real world works. So what are we teaching kids along the way? So parenting with love and logic is really, it's a classroom philosophy. It's also a parenting philosophy that really just says, how do we go alongside our kids to allow them to make mistakes, allow them to make as many choices along the way, because that's when kids own their life. Because you and I can't be with our kids 24/7. We'd like to be sometimes. We can't help them make all their decisions. They're going to be making their own decisions. So how do we help them make healthy ones? And even when they blow it, what does that look like? How are they still loved through it?
I can tell you that from our data that we collect working with post-secondary students, is that making choices is one of the areas that they're falling down on. It stresses them out. They don't feel equipped to do it, and they don't know what to do. Part of the paralysis of that whole process is they're worried that they'll make a bad choice and then they won't know what to do with a bad choice. So that speaks like, we know this is real, this is really happening, and these are smart, capable kids, young adults, because they never learn this stuff.
Right, and we live in a world that's very busy, and parenting time is, we're supposed to have more free time than ever because that's what devices are supposed to do. Technology is supposed to give us more free time, and yet we fill that up with other stuff. But we do know that those relationship components are key in terms of, I call it allies. When you're your kid's ally, when they know you're in their corner, when you have a relationship with them so that they're going to tell you when they mess up because they're not afraid of getting beaten, figuratively speaking. They're not just going to get emotionally beat up or yelled at because of it. They're going to actually get an empathy piece, because we all, one of the most beautiful analogies they give is, let's say that you've missed your airline flight because you were late. It was all on you. You or I, and we didn't give ourselves enough time. We were racing to get to the airport, but we missed we've been there. Now, if you get up to the counter and you're treated like this, I can't believe, don't you know we have a cutoff at 30 minutes before? How can you even think we're going to get you on this plane? Are you stupid? Like, that's ridiculous. How many times do we have to tell you? We have a policy online. What are you thinking right now as the person standing on the other side of the counter? Are you focusing on the fact that I made a mistake? No. All you're thinking about is what a jerk this person on the other side of the counter is. Now, how much different is it than when that person says, "Oh, I'm so sorry you missed your plane. That it's happened to me before too. How can we help you figure out what this is going to look like? We have some options for you. It might cost you some money to get on a different flight, but how can we help? Much different, goes to a different part of the brain. I don't want to fight this person or run away from this person. They're now my ally in helping me solve a problem that I created. And so how do we help parents do the same thing with their kids rather than just point out the failure? Because most kids know when they've blown it, when they've done something mean or lied or cheated or broken something. How do we help them to own it? We help them to own it by empathizing with them and by allowing them to feel the consequences in their heart and being loved right through it, and that they can survive it. The college kid that you just said that has trouble making choices because if they fail, I guarantee you they've not had someone at some portion of their life helping them walk through a mistake that they made and get through the other side in a healthy way. And that's for all of us as adults. How do we even help one another know it's okay to make mistakes and love each other through it rather than just give them a lashing? And so it goes to a different part of the brain, and it helps us be more whole as a person to actually know we can survive mistakes when we're loved through it and somebody cares enough to help me figure out what that looks like. That's really parenting with love and logic. It's generally we've done it in different components, but it's 7 weeks of building on skills and developing consequences and helping develop the empathy piece in parents and really convincing them that getting angry will not help the situation.
I so appreciate all of that, and that's such an amazing program. It speaks to one of my passion projects, which is this weird thing we have happening in our society where parenting is arguably the most important job in our society, and yet most of us are socialized to think that we can do it ourselves and we don't need to learn how to do it. We don't need to take classes to learn how to do it, which is absurd, because we do need to learn how to do all these things. Otherwise, we're not doing the best job as parents, and we're not preparing our kids, and we're not having the healthiest relationships with our own kids. And a lot of us are just repeating what was done to us. And
Right.
how did that work for you, right? How did that feel?
Right. So, here's what we find: most parents, they either rebel against what their parents did because they thought it was so bad,
Yeah.
or they totally embrace it even without knowing it. How many times have you said something, or I've said something, it's like, oh man, I can't believe I've just become my parent.
My mother's inside my mouth.
Yeah, exactly. Even though I said I would probably never want to say that, it just came out.
Yeah.
And so helping parents realize how they were parented, and that there might be a different way. It doesn't mean that I don't think anybody ever sets out to be a lousy parent. It's just sometimes our toolboxes are really shallow. And so how can we, that's what we try to do at Courage for Youth. How do we try to put more tools in people's lifelong toolboxes for relationships, for social and emotional well-being, that will help them navigate the world in which we all live to be a healthier, kinder place?
I think that description is really powerful, because for people who haven't engaged in any kind of parenting education or skills, it's when you do these courses, it's not about someone telling you how to do things. It's giving you all these different ideas and strategies and tools that you can try, because no two kids are alike either. I have twins, and I've had to do different approaches with both of them because they need different things. So how do you know how to do all that? Particularly if all you're carrying with you is what was done to you by your parents. There's like a whole bunch of other stuff you can try that'll probably work better. Yeah.
What you just said is one of the key learnings of Love and Logic early on, is life isn't fair. Like, we need to stop pretending that life is fair. Your life isn't like mine. Mine isn't like yours. Nothing's equal almost anywhere. And our kids are very different. So when, one of the things we learned is when we first took Parenting with Love and Logic was to be able to say to our kids, because they'll use that one all the time, well, that's not fair that you didn't give them that consequence. You're right. Life isn't fair. And what matters to them isn't going to matter. So, your
Same
kids are like mine.
Fair. That was our thing. Same isn't fair.
Right.
So
what's a good consequence, because it will help them learn, might not be a consequence that means anything to the other kid at all. Right. And so how do you individualize the consequence? By knowing what's important to them, and either affirming by rewarding, or by taking something away as a consequence but it has to be something that actually matters. I have friends of mine, they said, we threaten to take away their cell phone, but they don't really care about their cell phone. Okay, well then that's not a good consequence, right? Because if it doesn't mean anything to them, what does it matter?
Yeah.
Or if we threaten to not let them hang out with us on the weekend, well, they don't really want to hang out with you, so that maybe isn't the right thing. So how do you develop really intentionally develop consequences that mean something, both in the affirmative and in the takeaway?
So Gary, I think we're running out of time, but I think that afforded us a really good overview of what Courage for Youth does. Like we said, viewers can learn more about the various programs online. I'm happy to share our secret, which is not really a secret, that we're partnering this year to work together to see where that leads. And we're really excited to be working with you, because we so believe in everything you're doing and your programs and your team, and we couldn't be happier. So want everybody to know that's happening. Also, the Love and Logic piece, I Googled it, so you can Google it and find out more about the Institute. And there's some details on your website as well that relate to that.
And I would just say, if you're interested at all, there's some really key books, really easy to read parenting books from Love and Logic that will give you, I'm not sure when our next Love and Logic course is going to be. It's going to be sometime during this year ahead. But even if you can't make that, simply reading the Love and Logic book and the philosophy behind it and practicing some of the things in there will change the way you parent, almost guaranteed, to a positive way. Again, some of my facilitators, some of the Courage for Youth facilitators of our Scream and Voices program were people that came through Parenting with Love and Logic over a decade ago, and so believed in the philosophy and how it changed their own family dynamic that they said, we want to be a part of this organization and what they do. And so it's a powerful piece. It's supposed to take the war zone out of parenting. It really helps parents and kids not do that and become more allies, even though we're going to have some conflict, but it's going to be a healthy conflict rather than just batting heads. Because there's some tumultuous years, as you know, raising kids.
I was going to
It's
say,
not all easy.
whether it's the Courage for Youth programming, Love and Logic methods, all of this ties into mental health for kids and mental health for families and parents and teachers. And that's what we're all about. If you want to have a resilient, healthy kid that can tackle life in a way that maintains their health and hopefully brings them happiness, I mean, that's the goal, right? And that's exactly what you're teaching families to do.
We're striving for that. We're striving for that, and we're really looking forward to the year ahead, partnering with Third Space, because we believe, again, we share so many of the same values. So how we're going to live that out in the character of our organizations and who we are is we're going to find some really neat opportunities for blending what we do together and making a bigger impact in this community. So we're really excited for what this year ahead holds for us.
Same. Well, thanks for joining us, Gary. We'll have you back and talk about something else soon, or one of your team members. I'd like to talk about Voices as well. Yes,
Voices, a grade 5 program, which is really sort of just a precursor of the SCREAM program with some basic language around relational aggression and assertive communication and peer pressure. And it's spread out over 5 or 6 weeks, but it's for boys and girls in grade 5. And yeah, we'll talk more about that too. Again, thanks. It's been a privilege to be here with you, Jody, and thanks. I'm looking forward to the year ahead working with you.
Yeah, right back at you. Thanks, Gary. So I'll just remind all our viewers, you can learn more about Courage for Youth at courageforyouth.com and Third Space Life Charity at thirdspacecanada.org. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram, as well as see video recordings of this show and all of our others on our YouTube channel. We're on our summer schedule right now, so join us every Thursday at 5 for our next show, and we hope to see you there. And stay tuned as well, because we have an upcoming fundraising event that we are promoting on our socials and on our website. So if you're interested in fine art and you're interested in being part of community and supporting our cause, be sure to check that out. So we'll see you again soon. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Take care. Thank you, you too.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.